Hi everyone, this is Sherry Chen from Real Estate Tax Tips. Thank you so much for watching my YouTube channel. Today I have Hussein Kudrati here. He's my will lawyer, estate lawyer, and he helped me draft up my will last year. And today we are going to talk about setting up our will and why it is so important to set up our will, especially if you're a real estate investor and when you have kids. Before I go into the details, if you like our video and find it useful, make sure you subscribe to our channel below, give us a thumbs up or leave any comments or questions. I'm sure Hussein would not mind answering some of the questions for us. Welcome, Hussein. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about the process, because I know that the rules and regulation and the law around leaving assets when you pass away is very complicated in Canada, and that's why I have you here helping me. So I wanted to I want to share with our audience how complicated this thing is when you pass away.
Sure. So when you pass away, the first thing that people should know is that you're deemed to have sold all of your assets the day before you died. What that will mean is that essentially you have to bequeath it to someone, and there will be capital gains on all of your capital assets. You'll also have to pay a final tax return, both for the year of your death, and then if your estate is not wrapped up, and it almost never is wrapped up in the first year, you'll have to pay a terminal tax return, which would be done by your accountant. What your executor, assuming you have a will have to do, they're responsible for organizing your funeral unless you've prepaid for it, which is an option. The second thing your executor will have to do is they'll have to collect your assets and liabilities. The easiest way to do that is to make sure that you leave a list for them so that they're not scrambling, wondering what financial institution, what you have where. Leaving a list for them will help them accumulate that. Once they have that information, and assuming you've prepared a will that requires what is known as probate, what is legally known as estate administration, they will go to a lawyer that they will retain to begin that process. The process starts by filing what is known as an application for certificate of appointment of a state trustee with a will. That process, once it's filed, takes, depending on the municipality that you died, will take about 8 weeks best case scenario, and can take anywhere up to 6 months from my experience to get that certificate. During that time, most of your funds will be frozen unless effective planning has taken place. Once they get the certificate of appointment, they will be able to open up an estate bank account and deal with your assets and begin the distribution process. Once they get that certificate, they also have to file the estate information return as quickly as possible. And then once everything is distributed, they have to apply for a clearance certificate before they can give anything officially out to the beneficiary. So you can allocate it, but you cannot pay it out until you have a clearance certificate, because if you do, the executor can be personally liable if there's any unpaid tax determined by the CRA. So always make sure, if you're an executor, that you wait for the clearance certificate.
So in summary, then if you don't have a will, you will have to go to the government to apply for.
So then you apply for a certificate of appointment of a state trustee without a will, and that's an interstate application. Now for that, you also have to then show that you're eligible or entitled to apply. So if you don't pick someone, you run into problems. Some of the common problems is two people apply saying we both want to do it. Another problem you can run into is disagreements, where, because the lawyer will need, if two people are saying, like two siblings say they both want to do it, then both will have to sign. If one's not available and one doesn't want to cooperate, you can delay. So there can be a lot of suffering to your family and disintegration of the family unit if you don't take the time to actually think about who you want and have an agreement that they are willing to also take on that role. Because sometimes who you want may not want that role because it's a lot of work. So make sure they are willing to take on the responsibility.
My next question to you is, what happens if you don't have a will and you have two children? Like me, I have two underage children and they're only 5 and 7. What happens if Erwin and I don't set up a will?
So if you don't set up a will, then you're at the mercy that you hope that a loved one or a family member would step up and apply to be made the guardian of property and custodian. Now, most likely, the guardian of property would not be granted because the court will say that if your children are minors, then money should be protected by the court, and the court should approve all expenses. Going through the office of the children's lawyer, as noble institution as it is, can be burdensome, can be difficult, can take a lot of time, is expensive, and a lot of people don't want to do that. So you could have left a large estate for your children, but if it's tied up with the OCL, your children's guardian may not be willing to take on that role. Again, similar to executive, you could also have conflict. What if say a couple gets into an accident, they both pass away, and then the couple sibling, the husband sibling and the wife sibling both say we should be the guardians. Again, you run into significant conflict, and what will result is that your children will be treated as pawns. So it's better, and who better, truly, than you to decide who should take care of your children in your absence.
Absolutely. That's the reason why we have our own will set up last year. I have one last question. The last question is, as a lot of our subscribers are real estate investors, like what happens if you don't set up a will and you have a large, like say a portfolio of 5 properties?
So the biggest issue that you're going to run into is, firstly, who's going to pay the property taxes and matters relating to that. Now, assuming if you're incorporated, if there's other partners involved, it's not as bad a situation. But say that you just bought some investment properties and you held it in a corporation. There's no one now authorized to actually operate the corporation if you don't have a will. They've got no authority to access the corporate bank account, so who's going to pay all these liabilities? The second issue that you will face when you own real estate that without having a will is you have mortgages. A lot of people do. The mortgage has a covenant that requires you to be alive, and that the mortgage actually comes due on death. So sometimes it might not be wise. You might want to keep that in your family, in your portfolio. So often when you have a will, like a good lawyer will put a clause that the executor is allowed to remortgage, maintain, and so therefore then banks are willing to work with it. But banks don't want to deal with typically messy estates. At that point, they would rather force a sale, but you run into a chicken and egg situation, because then also there's no authority as to who can sign agreement of purchase and sale. So you run into massive costs because you're going to end up in litigation, require court orders, and other matters that when you have any kind of real estate, quite frankly, investment or otherwise, it is critical that you consider having a will in place.
Well, now all of us are all scared. We should all get a will yesterday. Thank you so much, Hussein, for joining me. Thank you for explaining the importance of having a will set up. For anyone who's interested in getting in touch with Hussein about setting up a will, his contact information is going to be in the show notes below. For anyone who liked this video, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, or share it with your loved ones, because truthfully, everyone should have a will. If you have any questions, make sure you leave your questions in the comments, and we will get back to you in the comment section. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.